with the, what were we calling it? Interactive podcast?
Interactive, yeah.
Right?
I think that was the name I threw yesterday.
Let's do it. Interactive podcast.
Yeah.
First one of many. We're here with Dr. Adam Wade, and we're going to go over a couple of things that you can do with your clients or by yourself to just move better. There's a lot of things out there, especially in the strength and conditioning world, and CrossFit puts a lot of great stuff out there, but there's always that missing piece where, yeah, people move bad, but how do we fix it? And no one actually talks about how to fix it. They kind of say, yeah, this is a problem, or they expect you to know what the problem automatically is. But right now, most people don't know. So instead of saying instead of telling people, get your knees out, get your knees out, get your knees out when you squat, well, maybe they just can't. So we're gonna go over reasons and
yeah,
stuff.
Yeah. So the whole reason I think we're here today is I wanted to basically come up with a simple way for coaches to assess new or current or even advanced members for limitations on them that's affecting their, like, how well they can do a movement, right? So there's a ton of functional movement screens out there that different people do, and some people use it as a way to say don't do that movement, or some people use it as a way to assess someone, to give them basically homework or strengthening stuff, to allow them or to give them the capacity to improve how they move. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So first thing I wanted to go over was mobility, and I find there's this common misconception in CrossFit circles about what mobility truly is. Some people talk about mobility and it's just how well you move. Some people talk about mobility and it's stretching, and it's really, mobility is just, can you do a movement and can you do it well, right? And mobility is comprised of two things. It's comprised of flexibility, so does your joint actually move throughout a range of motion, okay? And stability, can you actually stabilize the joint or hold the joint in a good position while you're doing that movement, right? So depending on how you want to improve someone's movement, what's going to happen is you're going to attack one of those things. Is it going to be how strong they are in that movement, or is it going to be how flexible their joint is to move through that range of motion?
And that's so true. If you look at Coach Travis Mash, fantastic Olympic lifting coach, he calls certain movements that they do at the beginning and end of his workouts. He'll do, he loves pause squats. He loves them. In the front rack in the overhead position. So the pause squat and overhead position, the Zotz press, for him that's active mobility work that he calls it. He calls it active mobility work. And what it does is not necessarily improve range of motion because you're sitting there overhead, but it really improves that stabilization factor, right?
Well, he's sort of doing two things. So if you're doing in the bottom of the squat, you're holding a position, basically what he's training is your stability at your most vulnerable position when you're doing Olympic lifting, which is the bottom, right? The other thing, and I guess to talk about flexibility, the other thing he's doing with that is utilizing strength, right, or strength training to increase flexibility. So there's two ways to increase flexibility of a joint. One is through prolonged stretching. The other is through strength training with proper positioning. So typically, a combination of both is ideal, but you can do one or the other and you will get better range of motion. Cool. So what I've done, I sort of sat down yesterday, went over a bunch of different movements that most coaches or even athletes are really familiar with, and tried to dissect them in a way that is simple and easy so that you can take someone, interpret where their limitations are, and then give them accessory work to do to make it better, okay? As opposed to just giving them cues, push your knees forward, push your knees out, keep your chest up. Maybe they just can't, right? Maybe they need some flexibility training, or they need some accessory work to create that stability, okay? So what we have, and what we're going to go over, is 3 basic movements in CrossFit that will hopefully, it's not going to tackle all of them, but it'll tackle some of the larger limitations that a lot of people have, okay? So the first thing that we're going to go over is the squat. So when you have someone who's just new to CrossFit or new to moving in general, right? Getting someone to do a squat is fairly telling on how well someone moves and what limitations they have on their body, okay? Be it flexibility or strength throughout that movement. Now, if you just take someone who's never done a squat before and you say, okay, show me a squat, right? They're going to do it wrong, right? Or they'll do something that is just hideous looking.
I'll just say something you said on the toilet.
But even doing that, most people, like, if you tell them, yes, That's how you sit on the toilet?
Awesome.
Head down.
It's a weird toilet.
But as far as doing the movement, I mean, you set them up in the right position, set them up for success, because you never know, people might just move well if you give them a good opportunity too. So, you know, give them simple cues. Make sure your feet are shoulder width apart, have your toes turned out slightly. When you squat, I want your knees and hips to move together. I want you to keep your chest up and push your knees out over your feet. Simple, right? And even as they're doing it, have them do 10 or 15 squats, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes as people, their nervous system optimizes, they'll get better, right? So if you evaluate someone off of their very first squat, you're probably going to get the extra work they need to do, you're going to get it wrong, right? Or you're going to give them stuff that, you know, isn't actually going to help them. So, Sil, show me a squat.
Good squat.
Yeah, show me a good squat. Show me a good squat.
Ready?
So, Sil squats, keeps his back straight, knees are pushed out over top of his feet are flat on the ground, right? It's a good squat. Come on back up for me. Show me an awful squat. It's not even a squat, it's like a deadlift. Show me a squat where your knees fall in, right? So Sil's squatting here, if you can come around the front. So when Sil squats here, his knees fall in, so his feet fall in, his knees fall in, although his knees come way forward, which is good, right? So if we were to evaluate here, right, if we're going to go from the bottom up, we'll look at his ankle range of motion.
Actually, it hurts right now, right here.
Because you're putting what's called valgus stress in your knees. Come on back up for me, so you don't have to prolong the agony. So when you look at someone's squat, you can start from the top down and bottom up. It doesn't really matter, right? I like to start from the bottom up, okay? It just makes things a bit simpler, typically because ankles are largely the limiting factor in most people, okay? So when someone squats, you want to see, can they actually push their knees forward over top of their feet, right? So Sil, we're looking at this angle right here. He can push his knees forward, his knees are over top of his feet, okay? And if you look at him from the front, his knees actually track over top of his feet. They're not hugely out, they're not hugely in. This is the common fault that most people do, is they push their knees way too far in. Push them in. Yeah, a lot of people will squat like this, okay? Now, when you're assessing, when you're assessing ankle range of motion, you want to sort of check ankle range of motion in 2 ranges, right? So, come on, like flat on your back, actually. So, an easy-ish way to do this, right? You can take someone's foot, right? So if you're going to check their ankle range of motion, okay, you literally take their foot and push it up. Now, you want to push it up so his big toe is in line with his tibia here, okay? Because if you push his foot out like this, he actually gets more range of motion, but you're checking it into a range where he's going to push his knee in, okay? As opposed to if you push his foot straight up, it actually doesn't go quite as far, but this is the position you're going to want to be in when you squat, okay? So you want to check range in that proper position, okay? Make sense?
Yep.
Good.
So what range are we looking for? What are we looking for?
So as far as optimal range?
No, in terms of like the pressure applying to the foot, what are we looking for in terms of
You can push pretty hard. I mean, if you think about, what do you weigh?
225.
Okay, so 225 divided by 2, right? So you're putting 112 and a half pounds ideally on each foot. I was pushing with like 20 pounds pressure maybe, right? Push until it stops, right? Like you don't have to worry about not pushing hard enough because most people are, like unless you're a therapist, most people are so timid about pushing through ranges of motion, you're not going to hurt the person. So ankles are a huge one, right? If their knees fall in, if they can't get their knees forward, everything gets thrown off. As soon as you can't push your knees forward, what happens is your butt sits way behind you. So facing this way, just so the camera sees, show me a squat where you keep your knees, do a vertical shin squat.
A vertical shin squat.
Show me a vertical shin squat. And you can see his butt goes so far back, right? If you come from the side, you can actually see this too. So come on up from the top. So do a vertical shin squat. If you watch his lower back, right here, and he rounds, right? So this is where we get, lots of people call it winking, okay? So his lower back rounds here. The reason for that is he's got to keep his body weight, he's trying to keep his upper body so far forward so he stays balanced, right? That his lower back winks, okay? Lots of time people blame this on hamstrings for some reason, because your hamstring's attached to your hip. Really, it's ankles, okay? So there's number one. Number two, we look at the person's knees. Now, we showed you 2 things with his knees, where he dropped his knees in or where he kept his knees straight, okay? So, if you're going to show us a proper squat again, facing the camera. So when Sil does a proper squat, you can see he pushes his knees out over top of his feet. Now, everybody does this slightly different. Come on up for me. Some people say you have to push your knees out as far as they'll go out to create torque at your knee, or you have to push your knees straight out over top of your feet.
For the average person, if you just say as far as you want, you're probably not going to go.
They probably won't overdo it. If you find someone is over torquing their knee, okay. The issue I have with this is that as soon as you push to that range, you're putting a lot of stress on both your meniscus and on your ACL. Okay, so as you twist your knee like that, you put a ton of tension on your ACL. Okay. I like the idea as far as lining joints up. Drive your knee straight over top of your foot. You keep your knee over top of your foot, like in line with it. You shouldn't have any problems.
Right.
Now, some people, just because they like certain things slightly better, some people go out slightly. Okay, I'm fine with that, just not too far out.
And the opposite. Also, those people when you say knees out, knees over your toes, they'll get their knees out, but then they'll take their toes and they'll get their knees out. Their knees are still diving in.
Yeah. So their knees are still not over top.
So they're compensating. Because again, their ankle, seeming as doing this, they're just kind of they're kind of hiding a little bit.
Yeah. So usually I'll start people start with your toes out 20 degrees.
Yeah.
Right. You can find a little more, a little less. I was watching a video of Klokov the other day. Dude's out with this.
Yeah.
He's got huge external rotation, but his knees are out like crazy too. The only reason I can think he does that is it gets the bar closer to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I can think of. One of the things you want to look for with this is when someone squats, if they rotate their feet out, again, that's probably an ankle range of motion issue. So, sorry, back to the knees. So, a bad squat shows a bad squat where your knees fall in. So, if someone does this and you check their ankles and they have good range of motion, okay, probably it's an issue that either they have really tight adductors, which is the muscle on the inside here, or their glute medius, which are the muscles on the outside, don't work. Okay? When you tell someone to push their knees in, you're actually getting them to activate their head. True.
Right.
Sure. But if you keep cueing and they either say it's really tight in here, or they just can't do it, then a simple test is come lie on your right hand side. So if you want to test the strength of someone's glute medius, and it is kind of a generic test, with their legs straight. So you want them lined up so their foot, hip, and shoulder are all in line. Not forwards, not too far back, straight in line. Hold your leg there, don't let me press down. And still can resist me. So what you want to do, check it on both sides. And if it's a strong person who really does have an issue pushing their knees out, check it a couple of times because there could be a fatigue issue, right? So they do it well the first time, do it 5 or 6 times, and then if they start fatiguing, you can push their leg down. I was pushing down with like 10 pounds of force, and again, if you've got 200 pounds in the front rack and you're trying to push your knees out, you need a lot of force to do that.
That's right.
Okay? So just a simple test. So if their glutes or the glute med is weak, okay, you can do simple exercises. Leg raises and clamshells are 2 of them. So sorry, again, come lie on your right side. So same position to strengthen this with your legs out straight. So again, feet, hip, and shoulders all in line. So you're forward a little bit. Good. What I want you to do, tighten your stomach, okay, and raise your left leg up. Good, and back down. Now Sil actually does this really well. A common issue, or a common mistake that people do, they don't actually lock down their core here. What I want you to do, raise your leg up really high.
Without locking down my core?
Yeah. See how this shortens here, and then come back down, and then it lengthens. So he's actually using what's called his QL here to pull his whole pelvis up, instead of using the muscle right here. So use this, and then come back down. So just something you'll end up telling people to do is make sure that they tighten their core and don't use this area. They should feel it in here. They should feel a burn on the side of their hip. The second one of this is what's called a clamshell. So again, feet and hips in line, knees are out in front. You create almost a 90-degree angle. You're going to keep your feet together. Same thing with your hips. You want this nice and tight. Knees come apart. Good. And then come back down. Now again, you'd be surprised at how little you actually have to move this, because if you watch here, Sil actually rotates a bit. Lift your hip up. This will start to tip back. See how his whole pelvis rotates and then come back down? So as soon as he starts rotating, you're not using your glute med anymore. So that's the only range you need to do. Okay? Again, if someone has tight adductors, they're hardly going to get anywhere with this. Okay? Come on up for me. If you're suspecting that the reason they're driving their knees in is because their adductors on the inside are tight.
Adductors?
Yes, sorry. AD-ductors are the ones on the inside. AB ductors are the ones on the outside.
Yeah.
Hopefully this picked that up.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes. Isn't that the comment? That's the popular thing to say. We'll put it in the show notes.
The way I remember is if you adding to your body or...
You're adding to the midline or you're taking away.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So to check for an adductor tightness, okay, I actually got this exercise from Dr. Spina, who I think you're going to put on the podcast, hopefully, if we can get that set up. It's called the Cossack.
Cossack.
Cossack?
Yeah,
now, have you done it? Have you tried this? Okay, so
I'm not sure if I can do it today, but I haven't done it.
So you probably want your feet even wider than that, just because your legs are long. So you're going to have your feet spread wide apart, and you're basically doing a single leg squat while your opposite heel stays on the ground. Good? So to do this, your opposite leg, he's going to put a lot of stress on the inside of his groin. Okay? Now, while you're doing this, you want to keep good spine position, still rounded. Oh, there we go. It's harder.
It's harder.
So you're basically doing a single leg squat while your opposite leg comes out, and it's a good test for your adductors. Okay? Just like with the other stuff, the rehab for this, you can either stretch your adductor or you can actually do this, which is a strengthening exercise. Only go as far as you can, okay? Again, I always tell patients in my office, tension is good, pain is not, okay? Do you want to go until you feel tension? Pause there, then come to the other side. It's a nice dynamic warm-up, and you'll actually find you get increased range of motion of your adductors.
How many would you like? How many
would you do? 10.
10s?
Yeah.
How long would you hold it for?
I tend to not hold so much. I might pause for a second or two. Yeah, it's dynamic warm-up.
Yeah.
I'll tend to do, so before I do cleans or snatches where you're forcing your knees out really quickly to get into that catch position, use a dynamic range or a dynamic warm-up, which this is. Do a whole bunch of sets of it to get your hips warmed up so that when you start doing squat, squat snatch, you know, your body is capable of moving into that position. After that,
so we've hit ankles.
We've hit ankles. Knees. Your knees move. Knees are hips. Knees are a cue for hip weakness.
Yeah. So knees are not really generally the issue. It's just where they are. That is the issue. We talked about that.
It's very telling. Yes.
We talked about the abductors.
Another test for your adductor and or glutes. Okay. Is pigeon stretch. Pigeon stretch?
Yeah.
Okay, so pigeon stretch, this is one where it's a great stretch just to work on hip external rotation. Again, if you're having difficulty getting your hip into that external rotation, getting your knee out, okay? Doing this stretch is key. And if you get someone whose foot is way in and they're lifted way up in the air, chances are their hip is super, super tight, okay? So if they're strong, but they can't get into this position with their foot forward, probably it's a flexibility issue, not a stability issue. So the strengthening ones where we went over leg raises and clamshells, that's a stability issue, as opposed to the adductors and glutes, this is a flexibility issue, okay? The next one is lower back, okay? Now, we already showed you that with ankle limitation, you can exhibit a winking lower back, which most people jump to hamstrings, which not that I totally disagree with it. If someone can provide me with good research to prove that it's hamstrings, great. Let's go to hamstrings. From what I've seen so far and from my understanding of anatomy, I tend to say no.
Yeah.
Tend to. For your lower back, oftentimes lower back issues stem from thoracic spine immobility, hip immobility, okay, or lack of flexibility, or their core size.
Yeah.
So easy tests for this are doing things like hollow rock and arch rock. Okay. Now in CrossFit, everybody knows hollow rock. It's been a huge thing. Have you ever done arch rocks?
Superman's.
Yeah. Superman's. Same thing.
Are we rocking or are we holding?
I just want you to hold.
Okay.
So for an arch rock, the whole point of this. Show me an arch rock. Good. So you went up a little bit too much. Come down a bit. Good. So the whole point of an arch rock is to create strength in your lower back muscles without taking your lower back to end range. Yeah. So, come on, stand up for me. So just a little lesson on core stability. Okay, and again, being a chiropractor, this is stuff that I deal with on a daily basis, so I'm fairly passionate about it. So, if you think of taking your spine, so stand this way. So, arm out. So, your spine, for argument's sake, say your spine goes straight through the middle, okay? You have muscles on the back that pull you backwards, and you have your abs on the front that pull you forwards, okay? So it's kind of like a balancing act, okay? So you have this thin column in the middle, and you have muscles on the back and the front that will either flex you forwards or flex you backwards. Now, when you move, okay, your body's always looking for stability, okay? It wants to create tension around your spine so that your spine doesn't move. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if it's overhead doing a squat, it doesn't matter. Any movement you do, your body looks for stability. Now, optimal stability is where you have equal tension between abs and lower back muscles so that your spine is held in that central position and is allowed to flex forward and flex backwards, or at least it has room to. Oftentimes, especially with the overhead position, we'll go over this later, but oftentimes the overhead position, your body will look to create stability, and because most people are desk jockeys and sit at a desk all day like this, with their abs shut off, all they do is hyperextend their back, jam the joints together, and they're stable. The problem is that you have nowhere to move, okay? And as much as we try to do movements perfectly, right, they never are. There's always issues here and there, right? So if your body is incapable of moving a little bit into extension or a little bit into flexion, when you do that movement, the likelihood of injury, the likelihood of injury increases. Oftentimes people come in after doing like heavy thruster overhead, or even doing a back squat, usually where they don't have ankle flexibility and they hyperextend their lower back. What they do is they jam their lower back joints together. When the weight gets really heavy, if they twist slightly funny, all of a sudden those joints in their back get compressed like crazy, you end up bruising what's called your facet joints, and then you have tons of pain every time you extend backwards. Okay? So, if winking is an issue where the back rounds in the bottom, probably, or if it's not ankles, if it's not their hips, it's because they have weak lower back muscles. Okay, so arch rocks are a great one to do, providing they can hold that position without hyperextending and jamming the joints together. And as far as being able to test whether or not they're in that position, it's hard.
What I noticed when I was doing it and you told me I was hyperextending, I disengaged my lower abs. When I kept my lower abs tight, I tried to press. So we do a thing where we lean against the wall and try to press the lower backs against the wall to stay engaged as we mobilize for overhead. When I pressed back and I engaged my lower abs to also activate my lower back, then I didn't hyperextend. I felt a lot better.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as just looking at someone and saying, okay, you're hyperextended or you're not hyperextended, that's difficult to actually see. But if someone's in that position and you suspect they're hyperextended, have them tighten their lower abs. If they flatten out a little bit, probably they were pretty close to full hyperextension. Okay? So there's not only a fix for it, but, you know, ways to detect it. The opposite, if someone's has... What's that?
Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna get you to do, so I want you to do a squat with vertical shins. But keep, no, sorry. I want you to do a squat and keep your chest up. Basically hyperextend your lower back. You know how people when they, so some people come in to squat, you tell them to stay vertical, and they do this. They just hyperextend their back like crazy. So there, all Sill's done here, and it's hard getting him to break his good habits. But effectively, so he's hyperextended his lower back to create stability. The people where the butt sticks way out, right?
And the hands up here.
So again, this position, it tends to be more females that get into this position. Girls, they seem to be far more hypermobile in their lower backs than guys. Guys are more prone to winking. Women,
and as they pass that parallel, the hyperextension goes whoop, right?
Sometimes I've seen others where they just stay hyperextended and their chest comes up more and more. So what this is a lack of lower abdominal strength, and this is where we get, I mean, the fix is hollow rocks, right? Show me a hollow rock.
Alright. Or some L-sits.
But most people aren't strong enough to do an L-sit. I like the idea. So hollow rock, the whole point of this is, can you engage your lower abs, right? Basically, when he's lying flat on his back here, his lower back in here, so you can see, is flat pushed into the ground. Lower abs are turned on. You're doing good. Just keep holding.
This sucks.
It does suck. So this is like the advanced version. You ever done a dead bug?
Yeah.
Do you know how to do a dead bug? So dead bug, this is the simple version, providing you're not coordinationally challenged. So what you want to do, first thing you want to do, have your tailbone on the ground, not curled up, okay? In this position, you want to tighten your lower abs as much as you can to flatten your, so his lower back is pushed into the ground. And what you can do, you can just stick your hand in here. If you cannot get your hand in, they're good. If you can get your hand in underneath their lower back, one, it's a cue. You can push on their lower back to tell them to push it in, okay? But if they're not doing it, that's what you want to get them to work on. And just holding this position sometimes is difficult enough. The progression is to do opposite leg, opposite arm, okay? And you only want to go as low as you can, maintaining your back flat on the ground. Good? And then back up. Show me one where you break. So see how Sill's gone down, his lower back's broken. So he went to get the full range of motion to keep up with the rest of the class. The problem is, he's not doing himself any justice by letting his spine round like that. So this was a good one. Show me a bad one again. So he goes down and his back rounds, okay? We don't want to see this. It's defeating the purpose. Come on, back up. oftentimes what we end up seeing people do, part of it is a lack of coordination. They'll do same arm, same leg, and what's that? Yeah. Make sure you tell people not to rush it, right? You want them to do it slow and controlled to get used to engaging their lower abs.
Hey, champions don't win warm-up.
Very true. Okay, so there's lower abs. If their core is good, if they can do all of these things, no problem. The next thing we want to go to is your thoracic spine, which again, thoracic spine, like ankles, they seem to be at the extremes of the body, right? They seem to be the main culprits for all of this. If you can fix it. Thoracic spine is where your ribs come out. So thoracic spine goes from the base of your neck to the lowest part of your ribs down here, okay? So cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar spine. So you have 7 cervical spine vertebrae, you have 12 thoracic spine vertebrae, and you have 5 lumbar spine vertebrae. Your thoracic spine, okay, can be a culprit for a whole host of things. A lot of it is overhead stuff, but for doing a squat, it's also a significant issue there, okay? So with your thoracic spine, what you want to be able to do, turn facing this way, what you want to be able to do is take your thoracic spine, which should be actually curved forward. This is your natural position for it. But when you're doing a movement, you want to have flexibility in your back so that you can take it from a rounded position and straighten it up. Can you straighten yourself? Good. And now round, slouch forward. Show me a crafty position. So still slouch forward. Now this is him sitting at a desk. Now straighten up for me. Right? So he takes his spine from being rounded forward to straightening up. Okay? What we don't want to see, what a lot of people do when we tell them to straighten up, okay? I want you to round forward. Now hyperextend your lower back. So now this hasn't changed, well it did a little bit, and all he did was hyperextend his lower back to pull this up here, okay? Which is not the purpose, okay? By doing that, all he's done is jam the lower back joints into one another, okay? So what you want to be able to do, tighten your lower abs, hollow position. Now, so that's tight, move just your upper back up. Not your shoulders, I'll demonstrate. So, from the side, so from here, and I'm kind of rounded forward as it is, but from here, if I just do this, all I've done is extend my lower back, but it looks like my chest is up higher, as opposed to keep this tight and pull my chest up. Okay? So see how I can move my thoracic spine, or I can keep it in a crafty position and hyperextend my lower back. You're just bad at it because you're good at doing good movement. Okay? So, but again, that's what you want to look for. So you can take somebody and say, okay, I want you to straighten up your thoracic spine, you show them where it is, you tell them all about it, and all they do is this, their lower back, their shoulders are up higher, but they haven't actually changed the range of motion from it. Yeah. That was better. That was a lot better, actually. Yeah. Just don't demonstrate with people. Use someone else and demonstrate with them.
Yeah.
So for thoracic spine, if your thoracic spine is hyperkyphotic, so that's really rounded forward, these are the guys who, usually lawyers who sit at their desk 80 hours a week. If you squat with a hyperkyphotic spine, these are the people who are going to hyperextend their lower back. So again, we'll need lower ab strengthening. They're also the ones that if they're really rounded forward, they'll wink. Their butt will wink in the bottom to get their chest up. So you can do either one will actually get you into that position. So for thoracic spine mobility, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do. Most people actually do these. A lot of this stuff, though, I shouldn't say it's done wrong, it's not done optimally. Yeah. Okay? The main one I see is people with a foam roller. Okay? Just foam roller.
The one I do all the time?
I have a foam roller still. Let's see if you do it properly.
I don't know if I do it properly. I don't even know what you're talking about.
So, lie on foam roller, hands over your head to stretch your back out.
Sorry?
Lie on foam roller, stretch your back out.
Stretch my back.
Stretch your thoracic spine. So most people, they want to stretch their thoracic spine. They'll do this. They'll grab a hold of a kettlebell. So, and what's the first? I mean, you guys have been watching me now. What's the first thing to let go? His lower back. So this here, now he's got huge range of motion, and your upper back hasn't moved at all.
Awesome,
right? Or they'll do this and hold on to a kettlebell, which is great. All you're doing is creating tons of flexibility out of your lower back. What I want you to do: lift your hips up, tighten your lower abs, lift your hips up higher, right? So now what I want you to do, hands overhead, okay? Now try and get your hands to the ground. Those hands are already on the ground. Lower your hips just a little bit, but keep this tight. So as you lower your hips, your arms should lift up. Good. Tighten this more. See how it keeps breaking here? Keep that tight. Now, pull your hands to the ground.
Oh, baby.
It's hard, right?
Changed my life, Adam.
Well, so what he's been doing when he stretches, he's been compensating. So if you want to do that weighted one, go for it, right? But make sure your lower abs are engaged, right? There's too many people just hyperextend, just flop on it now. Do this, and then I go, oh yeah, my thoracic spine, it's getting hugely mobile. You'll probably get some out of it, but it's not optimal. The other thing is, and I like to endorse stretching into, well, I like to endorse stretching into a position that you're actually going to move into, right? So if you constantly stretch with a hyperextended lower back, probably you're going to start moving with a hyperextended lower back, right? I draw a huge issue with hip flexor stretches like that, where everybody hyperextends it.
On the couch stretch.
Yeah, hugely hyperextended lower back, which again trains you that, hey, I can just hyperextend my back to get range of motion, which is the wrong thing to do. So that's one where if you don't know how to engage your abs, you're probably not getting the most benefit you can from it. Are you getting some?
It's a very different stretch, very different stretch.
Yeah, deep. Yeah, well, I mean, you get some mobility from it doing the other way. Nobody's died from it. If you want to optimize it, make sure your lower abs are engaged and you're not compensating with your lower back.
I ain't got time to move like shit.
Well, time's at a premium, right? That's right. You only have so much time, you might as well do the best thing possible.
Yeah.
Cool? Yeah. So there's one for thoracic spine. The other one is doing Supermans, right? And just do holds.
Just holds.
But pull with your arms up, okay? Or just do upper body Supermans. Come on, line your stomach. Show us Superman again. Or an arch rock. So this is an arch rock. Now still using his lower back here. Okay, so come back down. Leave your legs on the ground. Tighten your lower abs like crazy. Okay, now raise just your arms up. See how he moved here? He actually moved his thoracic spine as opposed to his lower back. Now it's disengaging them. It's disengaging, so it's not a whole body exercise, but what it trains you to do is tighten your lower abs first, lift up your shoulders. It trains him to use strength to increase range of motion here. Okay, so this comes back to the first thing we said initially, where you can either use strength training, okay, throughout a proper range of motion with proper technique, or you can use flexibility training to get range of motion. This is one with your thoracic spine where you're not going to get a ton of range of motion. Use strength, right?
Those are harder than thrusters, man.
You're going to need strength in order to hold that position, so you might as well do strength training for it on a daily basis, right? That's a great activation exercise that you can do before you start lifting anything so that your body's in a better position, or at least it's been neurologically primed to move better. And those are sort of the main ones for squatting. So I want to keep kind of basic. There's tons more little things you can do.
But one thing that I have a question about.
Sure.
The first we talked about ankles.
Yeah.
We addressed the mobility issue.
Yeah.
We addressed how to test to see if they're immobile.
Yeah.
But not really. We pressed down on them. We saw that if they're immobile,
how to do a stretch for them.
Stretching for ankles, and what is good range of motion? Is there a measurement that we can use, or is it just once you start squatting better, you get good range of motion? How do you determine that?
So everybody's going to be different. Now, I mean, I would tend to say the more range of motion, the better, but there is a point to that, right?
In a good position.
Yeah, in a good position. If you start getting super flexible, it's not necessarily going to be all that beneficial for you, right? It'll be good because you have lots of leeway as long as you can control it, okay? You have lots of leeway if something goes wrong. But most people who have issues with this, they'll probably never get to be that flexible.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the best way to actually stretch their ankles, there's a bunch of different ones. Lots of people like the banded ones.
I just do the wall strip on the rig.
Where you just stick your foot on it.
But dig the heel on the ground.
So it's a good stretch, a fantastic stretch for movement specificity.
Okay.
Not that great because it doesn't tie in your knee, it doesn't tie in your hip. It's just ankle range of motion.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So I like.
Or if you're keeping your knee over your toe the entire time you're stretching out.
Sure, except that you never stretch with your upper leg straight, or so you don't squat with your upper leg straight.
Oh,
with your leg back.
I get what you're saying.
Right. So I like a soleus stretch. This is typically what it is. Yeah, so come up to it like this, and I'll use the wall or the rig as a guide.
Okay.
Drive your knee straight over top of your foot, and push your knee into the wall, or into the rig, what have you.
Without the heel coming up?
Yeah, without the heel coming up, and I'll show you from the front. So if I'm going to drive my leg forward, you keep talking about stretching your ankle with your knee over top of your foot.
Yeah.
Drive your knee straight over top of your foot when you do this, and we'll get to this point where you're like, I can go further if I do this.
Yeah.
But this is the position I want to be in. So again, stretch into the position you want to be in, not just the position that gives you the most range. So drive your knee straight forward and then sit there. What research has shown is that if you want to get the most out of a stretch and you want to show an increase in range of motion that will gradually gradually increase over a period of time
Yeah.
to get a hold of stretch for like 2 minutes
Okay.
or more.
Yeah.
Flexibility does not happen overnight, okay, especially with ankles, mainly because with ankles, typically the limiting factor is joint capsule and bone.
So would you use a band to distract?
I would, but only in one direction. Only in one direction. Where are your bands? Here they are. Yeah, only in one direction. Again, something else that I draw issue with, but I won't get too into it.
To each his own.
Yes. Well, I like to base it on anatomy, right? So the way your ankle is put together, so you have two bones that come down the front here, your tibia and fibula. Tibia comes down here to the inside, fibula comes down the outside, and it creates sort of it sits like this, right?
Yeah.
Your ankle, it's made up of a whole bunch of bones. The primary issue we have with this is what's called your talus, and it's like a block that sits in between there. So it sits like this, okay? When your toes come up, it comes forward, okay? When you point your toes, it comes this direction. When you're getting a restriction in here, what happens is this comes up and jams, okay? So if you want to do distraction, okay, what you want to do is take your tibia and fibula and yank them forward so that it doesn't jam, it passes through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, take your band, tie it onto the wall, make sure that these little bones that stick out here on either side, it's just above them. Yank back with as much tension as you can. And then the same thing, make sure your knee's over top of your foot, push your knee forward. Now this you can do flossing or just dynamic stuff, so you can go up and then back forward, okay? Or you can just sit there and hold that stretch. Again, make sure you're pushing your knee out over top of your foot. You don't want your knee coming in forward, because again, you're just stretching into a bad position. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's sort of it. With ankles, you tend to see a far slower change in range of motion.
Here's my issue with ankles. When people try to get better range of motion ankles in their clients, they'll program a crap load of exercises that don't help their range of motion. So they're maybe mobilizing, but then right after mobility, they're doing high volume box jumps, and then their ankles are tightened up, super tight. So what kind of things can you avoid in the meantime, or maybe lower the volume of to keep the...
Well, so if someone has tight ankles, they should do this every day regardless of what the workout is.
Yes,
right? You can tailor a warm-up to said workout, right? Which you should do anyways. Like your warm-up should mirror the ranges of motion that you're going to use throughout your workout. As far as doing that, I don't really know if there is a good answer to that. I mean, you can just tailor the program.
Get them to just do weighted box step-ups instead of high volume box jumps, right?
Yeah.
That way, it's just avoiding that pounding for your ankles. Or a lot of running. Get on the lower airline.
Running, you need range of motion at your ankle. Running, you'll be fine.
You're not going to get really tight ankles when you're running?
You get tight ankles doing anything, but again, when you run, your toe off, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have good ankle range of motion, you get really early heel lifting, you get tight calves. If you've mobilized your ankles and then you go and run properly, right? You'll use that ankle range of motion. About the only thing you wouldn't would be box jumps, and that would be only if you like a springboard.
If you just No,
I'm sorry. Yeah, by a springboard, you can jump really hard without bending your knees.
There's a guy in our gym who can jump, really heavy dude. He can deadlift a lot. And he can jump 36-inch box jumps, and he can just on and off. He's like super explosive. But
to jump that high though, but like if you're gonna jump really high for me, jump high.
Jump high, right?
Jump high. Do a vertical jump.
Oh, so I'm not gonna
do a vertical jump.
Okay.
He just shoved his knees way over top of his toes, did he not?
Maybe.
You did. Right? That's why I say, unless you're a springboard. You watch Rich Froning do box jumps, he's like he barely moves his legs because he's got super springy calf. If you're going to jump high, and if you're a new person and you're doing 24-inch box jumps, holy hell, you're going to take a swing and jump really hard, right? So, they'll get tight from the pounding, right? If you're going to stretch out, I don't think it's an issue, right? Did you ask another question there? I feel like you did.
Well, we talked about how to measure adequate.
There's no real measurement movement.
So yeah, so we're good with that.
Now ankle range of motion. So your ankles take time to get more flexible, and they take far more time than most other things, mainly because it's bone on bone.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, depending on the person, they tell you can't change your bone structure. It's not possible. Okay. Now, interestingly, if you look at like cell turnover in the body, okay, and this is another interesting fact from Spina. So you know how your body, aside from maybe your teeth, right? Your cells die and then they get replaced over and over and over again, right? I believe what was quoted was every 3 years, the you that is right now is no longer you. Like all those cells are dead and they're replaced with new ones. So your body responds to stress really well. This is why we train, right? You do weightlifting, you put a stress on your body adapts, you get stronger, fitter, what have you. So if you keep putting a stress on your ankle, right? You keep stressing it, I want more range, I want more range. As those cells die, turn over, create new cells, they'll respond to that stress and allow you to have more range of motion. Most people quit the stress. No, most people are like, I can't just, I'm giving up on it because it takes time. Bone turns over far slower than, say, muscle, right? So most people just give up on it. But if you're diligent with it, if you're consistent with it, you'll get more range of motion. You might never be the same as a gymnast in your class, right? But you'll get more range.
Makes sense.
Okay? It's just about being consistent.
Well, what about the last thing, self-massage for like your, you believe in that for the ankle, like your Achilles, lower calf,
like foam rolling stuff?
Yeah, foam rolling stuff or ball work or anything like that. Would that help? Like,
sure. So any of that stuff is good. Providing, well, I shouldn't how to word this. So as far as foam rolling,
smashing.
So smashing, yes, smashing. So as far as smashing is concerned, from what I've seen anyways, there is no good research to support that it does anything, okay? Based on my understanding of neurology and muscles' response to stress, I'll try to explain what it does. So, flexibility, you put a stress on a muscle, okay? Typically, if you're doing a stretch, like just a straight stretch, not foam rolling, if you're doing a straight stretch, you're putting a stress on the tissue, the main limiting factor is your nervous system. Your nervous system goes, that's far enough, I don't want you going any further, which is why PNF stretching works. Do that contract, relax, tricks your nervous system and your body goes, okay, I'll give you a little bit more, I'll give you a little bit more, okay? If you do enough stretching over a period of time, your nervous system gets adapted to that larger range of motion and you have bigger range without having to stretch. Foam rolling, lacrosse ball stuff, smashing. From what I've seen, I don't know if there's any good research on it. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff. So and so comes in and does foam rolling, they feel better. Now here's my explanation for why. So when you bang your elbow, right? Whack your elbow on something, what do?
Rub it.
Okay. Why do you rub it?
Because it hurts, man.
Yeah, and rubbing it makes it feel better. Okay. So if you do this, it numbs the area. So your body, so you get an injury, your body sends a signal that says, hey, this hurts. Okay? You rub it, you're sending a secondary signal that blocks that first one so you don't feel as much pain. Okay? It's called the, you remember exercise, maybe about physiology, gate theory of pain? You probably know the term.
I probably will.
You can Google gate theory of pain.
As long as how we man.
So, but that's what you're doing. You send a second stimulus, feels better. So, with foam rolling, right?
You're just saying we're numbing the pain.
You're not numbing the pain, okay? So, if you're not hurting, right? So you come in before a class, everything feels good, but you want to get more flexible. You foam roll the heck out of your IT band, it really hurts, right? Or you roll your hip flexors or what have you, and then you move. And people like doing this test-retest thing. They'll roll one side and not the other side, and then they do a movement. They're like, holy crap, it feels a whole ton better on the one side compared to the other. Maybe you're just numb.
Maybe.
Okay, but if you come in to work out, okay, you have lack of flexibility because your IT bands are tight, or your quads are tight, or your hip flexors are tight. You numb it up, right? And then you move better, right? So you haven't actually changed your flexibility, except for the fact that you've numbed your nervous system. That allows you to move better. Now you're using strength training to increase range of motion. And because you're numb to, your body's numb and you can move better, right? I'd still say that's good.
So it's fine. Maybe directly it doesn't do all that much, but like secondary of mashing and foam rolling makes us have better workouts in better position.
Exactly. So, and this comes down to when do you do what? Okay. So
people think foam rolling after workout.
To push out lactic acid. Which, so lactic acid
Just
doesn't
like in that
exist.
conversation. No,
Doesn't
that's
even
not.
exist. So number one, you're not pushing out lactic acid, okay? Number two,
Lactic acid is awesome.
number two, if you're hurting and you foam roll and you walk out, you're like, hey, my legs feel better, right?
Yeah.
Sure, you just numb them up.
Yeah.
Fantastic, go move better, right? So instead of hobbling out of the gym, you walk out nicely.
Yeah.
So as far as sequencing of things, at least the way, and we're sort of experimenting with this at my gym to see how people respond. That's the beauty of having a CrossFit, you can play with these things. And I'm doing it on solid science, at least not based on whatever, right? We have people come in, do their dynamic warm-up where the ranges should mimic what you're doing, okay, that day. Number two, we get them to do foam rolling, smash, and what have you, again, on an area that typically would be a limiting factor.
Okay.
Beyond that, people can do, you know, if they're inherently have tight hip flexors or their ankles, they can do other stuff for that. But foam rolling first, okay, or
Warm up first.
Warm up first, then foam rolling. Then you do your skill, right?
Yeah.
Then you work on, you know, doing snatches or doing wall balls, whatever you want. Do your strength, do your WOD, and then when you're done, then you do those prolonged stretches, okay? So you hold your ankle stretch for 2 minutes, right? The reason you want to hold off on doing those long stretches or till afterwards is that well, not only that, there's actually solid research that shows if you do a prolonged stretch before you do a hard workout, it actually increases your likelihood of injury.
Oh, really?
Again, nobody's died from stretching ahead of time, but if we can optimize, right? The research shows that if you stretch for a long period of time right before you work out, you increase your likelihood of injury, as opposed to if you do it afterwards, because we're just working for gradual change, right? With flexibility, there is no immediate response.
No. Makes sense. That's good to pull down. Static stretching.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe we write on a board, rate 2 different stretches that they'll need to work on. If they've done a whole bunch of lunges, chances are they're going to need to stretch their glutes.
Sweet. I'm gonna start doing that.
Yeah. It's
Make
just
it
like
make it more. If it's on the board, they'll do it. Like
exactly.
Do it.
Well, I mean, if you look at like some people's programming is just like here's the WOD and that's it.
Yeah. Oh, the
clock.
Each 9
The clock.
minutes and 59 seconds.
You've been talking for a while, probably. So you can, I mean, like as long as you write it on the board, right?
Yeah.
Write on what needs to be done and tailor it specifically to that workout, and you'll get a far better response from it.
Perfect. All right.
Beauty.
So that was a squat.
That was squat.
That was a whole lot of squats.
That's a lot.
All right.
But hopefully it's quick. I
A
mean,
lot
this
of
is-
good information there.
But hopefully if you can bring someone in, show them, set them up in a good position, and then you can assess pretty
Work them
quickly,
down.
and then give them a few things to work on. Right? If you get people who say, well, your ankles are bad, your hips are bad, your thoracic spine's bad, here's all the things you need to work on, people aren't going to do it.
No.
Give them 2.
Yeah.
Right? Give them homework to do, have them do it every day, make sure that they're doing it before they do that workout, because if, again, stuff that you write on the board is generally tailored to the day, whereas if someone has a specific issue, I'm not typically putting leg raises in clamshells. If someone is weak there, they should be doing that before they do their workout, and that should be part of their dynamic warm-up.
Solid.
Beauty.
All right.
So there's that one.
There's that
Yeah,
one.
pause.
There's 2 more. Holy smokes.
Time is
All right.
up.
Peace out.